Thanks so much, Dan. Can you hear me, everyone? Okay, great. We can go to the next slide, please. My name is Jack DiGiovanna, lead science strategy at Belsera. I'm really delighted to be here. It's really an honor to be part of the session and to follow Susan and Benedict. I have been involved in this community in NIH data systems since late 2015 when I joined Seven Bridges, serving as a co-PI, a PI, or supporting multiple ecosystems across the NIH, and also serve as a co-chair on the NCPI Systems Interoperation Working Group. So from Susan's house analogy, that would be the windows and doors, really, how do we interoperate technically, but also being able to look at for what end, who is the community, how do we get them to solve different scientific problems. Really honored today that we're going to be talking in this session with 5 amazing ecosystems. I'm going to start this session, if we can go to the next slide, please, to cover the basics of what ecosystems do and how interoperability works, so that each of the individual presenters can then get into the details and the unique aspects of their ecosystems to really help the community understand as you're designing and developing ecosystems within the NIA, what are the ways to move forward? What could work for you? What could work? What wouldn't work for you? And I know all these speakers are excellent. You're gonna want to ask questions. Please put them in the chat, put them in the Slido. But we have 10-minute slots, so it's going to be a little bit tight. So what we were going to have is a 25-minute Q&A at the end, a panel. So we'll try to find the common questions and bring them all together. So the first question to ask, really, if you go to the next slide, please, is what jobs do these ecosystems do? Why do we keep building so many of these? Next slide, please. And really, while data is foundational, it's to drive new insights. And what I try to show in this slide here is that it's an iterative process. From the data, you'll be able to look at that and get some information out. But then you may want to change the question that you're asking. You may want to look at the data in a new way. Keep iterating through that and get to some knowledge, eventually getting to insights. I mean, so many people here in the audience are scientists or researchers. You know that your first hypothesis is not going to be right. You don't just go to the data once and bam, we got the answer, let's go publish. You need to be able to work with it and collaborate and work through it. And there's really many different ecosystems. And I think, Benedict and Susan both did a great job in introducing that. But if you go to the next slide, there's a lot of commonalities that come out of them. And these slides were locked last week, so I didn't have time to add in care here, but the fair aspect, there's common themes that are really important, and collaboration is really square one. Being able to work in secure, customizable workspaces, having managed billing to address those costs of just overruns and different guardrails on it. Being user-friendly is really important because it's not just all one persona that we're serving with these different ecosystems. But you want the person who's writing bash scripts, but also the person who's writing RStudio, and also the person who's just scientifically very savvy, but wants to use no-code visualizations. How do you support all of those people in a secure way they can collaborate? Flexibility, really key in the middle, being ideally cloud agnostic because the data is all over the place and you want to be able to get to it wherever it is. Having automation, flexibility, coming across a way to developer-friendly tools, portability, being able to easily incorporate from external repos, excellent tool repos like the doc store, the generalist repos for data, being able to bring that all in so that everything doesn't have to be co-located in your ecosystem, but you can work across it. And then scalability, predictable computation, and sustainability are hugely important. So to get here, the cloud has really been foundational. So if you go to the next slide, please. I actually took this slide from Anthony Philippakis. This was in one of the first NCPI meetings that we had, talking about the previous solution was really that you deliver data to individual researchers. And there's a number of problems with that, which are listed below. But what the cloud has been made possible, if you click to the next slide, please, is being able to bring the researchers to the data, or most of the data, and to the tools. And that's really transformational in terms of data sharing, the infrastructure, being able to build on things that the cloud already provides, centralized security. But there's 2 issues here that have come up over time. So this bringing researchers to the data was really brought forward by NCI and the CRDC around the 2015, 2016 time. They're really exciting to see how that developed. Other ecosystems develop in similar ways, but there remains two problems to look into. Next slide, please. So the first, I have it introduced here as federated versus centralized. This is one of the themes of the session. But I want to say this is not necessarily a question with a right answer. This is an optimization. I work in multiple ecosystems. Some of them have it centralized, some of it have it federated, some of them have most of the data centralized, but some federated. And that's one of the questions that each of the presenters in this session will explain how they optimize for the research community that they have. And then thinking through the data sharing policy and putting that data up to generalist repos or wherever that goes, that also adds a facet to this discussion. The second question is also interesting as interoperability has developed. If you go to the next slide, please. It's really no more having just one home ecosystem. So there's a researcher on the top and she's going to a platform, and this could be Terra, this could be 7Bridges, this could be Gen3, doing some different analysis. And she just wants to test the hypothesis. She doesn't really care where the tools or data live. So actually it's connecting in from her home ecosystem, but also another gray and blue related ecosystem, another light gray and blue other ecosystem, a clinical ecosystem. All of this data is coming in. And this is really made possible by the incredible advances in interoperability in GA4GH and FHIR and NCPI. There's also no free lunch. A number of challenges abound when you start to bring all this together and things are possible which were not possible before. So if you go to the next slide, please. Both Susan and Benedict already covered this, but the NCPI was formed to really address this. And there's links here. There's also links in the chat. What's really exciting about it to me is from the onset, they had a strong focus on both demonstrating scientific progress and generalizable technology standards. And it's very important the logical end between the two of them, because if it was just really focused on science, grad students would hack around and find some solution that's totally not reproducible, that just gets the paper out and then they go off and graduate and that's done. At the same time, if it was just focused on tech, it could be a very long academic discussion around some hypothetical things that don't actually support scientific use cases. So really bringing them together has been really powerful to make sure that we're making progress, but we're making progress in the right direction. So this is, what I've talked about today is really focused on how do you support research communities. NCPI has been looking at interoperability for research communities, but coming back to a question that was in the first section, if you go to the next slide, what I'm really passionate about is, looking at the strategic plan for data science at NIH. If you look at the first three pillars and the fifth pillar, you could really say, okay, this really suggests we should build an ecosystem. This is really important for supporting the community. I really focus in personally on the fourth one, on workforce development, because all of the work that has been done to put data together, get it research ready, get it described, have tools, have tutorials. This is great for the current research community, but it can also be used to train the next generation of data scientists. And we do see it being used across the community in graduate level classes, bachelor's level classes. It's been used in high schools. It's getting out to different underprivileged communities in engagements like Aim Ahead to be able to say, hey, we've put all this data together. Why don't you try to work with it? Why don't you ask your research questions in cases where those students couldn't ask them before? So really excited to see, and something to consider that I hope comes through in this section as you're considering about ecosystems, how can you use it to train the next generation of scientists? So next slide, please. Wrapping up, we had a lot of discussions with the conference organizers, and we had a lot of good debates around this. There's so many people that we wanted to ask to talk and so much content that we wanted to cover in each of these ecosystems. We decided that these 5 were a really good representative sample of the types of things that you might want to do. There's certainly more. It also means that the presentations are going to be a little bit condensed, but again, we have a 25-minute panel at the end. So please try to get your questions into the Slido, and we will be able to address them all as a team and look for commonalities between them. So with that, I want to say thank you and introduce Tanya Davison, the Chief of the Data Ecosystems Branch at NCI, who's going to talk to us about the CRDC.
Thank you, Jack. All right, great. So let me start my timer. Hi, everyone. 10 minutes is kind of a short amount of time to introduce the CRDC and answer 2 questions that have been asked to put into this presentation. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So our vision for the CRDC is really to have, very briefly, a real stakeholder focus, and that includes all the scientists and clinicians of all technical abilities that are using our data, as well as our NIH staff, right? Our intramural staff that are generating data, as well as our extramural program staff that are managing grants and contracts that are generating data. But the middle thing here is the thing I really want to talk about is lowering barriers. We want to lower barriers to data submission, to fair data access, search and retrieval, to the integration of data through for cross-domain analyses, and lowering barriers to analysis platforms, tools, and workflows, especially those things, computational things that can be a little bit intimidating for maybe the bench scientist. Finally, we also want to focus on infrastructure and sustainability to have a secure and appropriate access for our data sets, a sustainable and reusable architecture. And we also need to focus on long-term planning for all the storage of the data and accessibility to the tools that we're providing. Next slide. So this slide has some animations. If you could click forward 4 times. Until you see CRDC at the bottom of the slide. Thank you. Okay, so the CRDC is really part of the national cancer data ecosystem, which involves surveillance, patient participation, and discovery. You can see the icons listed along all 3 of these levels of the ecosystem here, representing different parts of the Cancer Research Data Commons. Click forward twice. And what you're going to see here is we're replicating all of our data. We're either storing it directly on the cloud or we're replicating it onto the cloud so that we can have cloud-based analyses. Next slide. So our goal here really is to be NCI's primary data science platform for cancer research. Our mission is to empower the researchers who are by providing access to the cancer data ecosystem with state-of-the-art visualization, analysis, interoperability tools, all in this flexible cloud-based environment that I've been talking about. We want to preserve the long-term value of the NCI-funded data as well as access to that data. We want to improve data submission, access, and interoperability that a lot of our speakers have already been talking about, and accelerate that cancer research through the integrative analysis of multimodal data. Next slide. Here you can see the Cancer Research Data Commons is really, I've kind of put it into different sections here by the colors, right? So you can see in the blue, we've got our data commons to the kind of upper right of the slide. These represent our either data-centric or data-agnostic repositories, data commons. So that includes our genomic, imaging, and proteomic data commons. We have an integrated canine data commons as well as a clinical trial data commons that will be released later this year. Those are all data type specific, as their names indicate. Our cancer data service that's kind of in the middle of those leaves there is data type agnostic. So if you have a data set that is not accepted by another of our commons that are represented here, you can come to the cancer data service to submit your data. In the yellow, it shows kind of coming soon resources. And then on the other side of this tree, we have our data interoperability and analysis components. Our data common framework is where we have reusable components like authorization, authentication. That's where we'll be implementing RAS, for example. Our data standard services help us standardize our metadata across the CRDC to make it more findable and accessible and reusable. And our cancer data aggregator provides an API that searches across all of these data commons that you see listed on the right-hand side so that you can do global searches across the CRDC. I should mention that each of our data commons has both APIs and GUIs that you can go to explore the data. Sometimes you're allowed to download it. So for example, our GDC and PDC allow download of the data, and they all offer visualization and some offer some analysis tools in addition to that. But because we're replicating or storing all of this data in the cloud, we also offer 3 NCI cloud resources that really provide the workspaces for cloud-enabled analysis. Again, this is the researcher coming to the data as opposed to the researcher having to download the data and do everything locally. So our 3 NCI cloud resources, one's at Broad, one's at Seven Bridges or Valsera, and one's at the Institute for Systems Biology. They all kind of serve different populations for analysis of the cloud-based data. They also all, of course, allow you to bring your own data to your workspace, bring your own tools to the workspace, use the tools or workflows present in each of our cloud resources, and then, of course, build your own pipelines. In addition to that, our workspaces allow you to share the data with your fellow researchers or within a consortium. The workspace is your own and you control access to it. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that I was asked to answer is, when did the data in the CRDC become fair? So I'm just showing here our kind of timeline of the CRDC. I think as Jack mentioned, we really kind of started fairly early. The award for the GDC and the cloud resources happened in 2014, with those resources going live in early 2016. And I would argue that our data really has been fair all along. Each of our resources strives to standardize the metadata that's submitted to them so that when you search across those data sets, you're able to, you're able to find all the information that you need. Next slide. And then the other question I was asked to answer is, how do you measure fairness? I do think that's a really hard question to answer. One way you could answer that question is, how many metadata elements are we standardizing across the CRDC, for example? And that is work that we're currently doing with our data standard services within the CRDC, standardizing that metadata so that our cancer data aggregator can search across all of those repositories and data commons to give that answer to the users. However, I think another way that you can answer that question is by looking at the statistics that we have for each of our resources. So here on this slide, I not only have, for example, the amount of data that's available, but also information on the usage of the data. And some of this slide is probably about 8 months old. So some of these statistics are a little lower than they actually are in real life, but you'll get the idea, right? So for example, our genomic data commons has about 3 petabytes of data on 85,000 cases. We have about 65, I think it's closer to 70,000 users per month. Those are unique users. I think if the data weren't fair, weren't findable, weren't usable, that we wouldn't have nearly 70,000 users per month. The Genomic Data Commons offers data sets on-prem, which allows for egress-free download charges. So the primary way of accessing the data, in addition to the GUI and API, is doing downloads. And there's 2+ petabytes of data. So nearly the entire GDC is downloaded every month by our users. So I think the data is very, very fair in the GDC. Some other statistics on the other data commons here as well, but I want to talk a little bit about our cloud resources. The usage here is a little bit lower. I think that the barrier to entry is a bit higher because, again, these are your computational workspaces in the cloud. Maybe not for every user out there, but we do have about 12,000 registered users across our 3 cloud resources, about 4 petabytes of data available, and over 2,000 years of compute have already been done. So next slide, please. The last 2 slides, I'm going to focus on kind of our roadmap for the future. This is the long-term vision of what it is we want to do in the CRDC. We want to move towards a learning healthcare system for cancer, including increasing data sharing across the cancer data ecosystem and beyond, across other diseases as well, because as I think both Susan and Benedict earlier, pointed out, we need to share that data across diseases. We also want to, of course, address inequalities in cancer care and research and foster a collaborative research community. But further Beyond that, we want to expand our data commons to make sure we're taking in all that important data to share and really improve the usability of both the analytical and the visualization tools. Again, kind of lowering the barrier to accessing the data and making it more fair. We intend to have a centralized, intuitive, and comprehensive tools for all data type and all users, as well as concierge service for one-on-one help. And I realize I'm at 10 minutes, but just go to the very last slide. Again, in the spirit of making data fair, right now you have to go to individual GUIs if you want to look at the different data commons. Our goal in the future is to have a single CRDC data hub. Also, if you want to submit data to the individual data commons, you have to do it to each of the data commons. Our goal long term is to have a single submission site and a single data discovery dashboard for the entire CRDC, all of the data commons, again, making the data more fair. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was really great. I want to pass it now to George Papanikolaou, who is the Program Officer for the Common Fund Data Ecosystem.
Thanks so much, Jack. I'm having some internet flakiness, so I'm going to try this without a camera, and let me know, Jack, if my voice drops through, okay?
You're loud and clear for now.
All right, let's cross our fingers. Hi, everyone. I'm George Papanikolaou, the program leader for the Common Fund Data Ecosystem. On behalf of our program team and partnering CF programs, I'd like to discuss the current and future phases of the program, as well as provide answers to questions provided by the moderator. Next slide. The goal of CFDE is to create a functioning ecosystem that makes Common Fund data sets more impactful by enabling easier data access and use. We have three aims. The first is to enable users to search across and use multiple CF data sets. Next, we want to provide training and outreach to bring people to CF data. And third, coordinate and integrate infrastructure and activities into a cohesive ecosystem. To the right, you can see how CFDE fits within the world of data users and data generators, and how we integrate these teams, tools, and data sets. Next slide. First, a little background on CFDE. CFDE is currently in its pilot phase, or phase 1. We're in the 4th year. During the pilot phase, CFDE comprised a coordinating center and some data coordination centers of various Common Fund programs. We call these data coordination centers DCCs. The CFDE Coordinating Center is currently responsible for the technical and logistic coordination of the CFDE consortium, and it has been set up to create the CFDE portal, which I'll show in an upcoming slide. The Coordinating Center is also responsible for training and outreach for the consortium. The portal includes a searchable catalog of metadata about the data sets of the engaged Common Fund programs. This catalog was created by ingesting the standard metadata provided by DCCs, using a metadata model that is called the cross-cut metadata model, or C2M2. The DCCs of the engaged Common Fund programs participate in the ecosystem by contributing the metadata about their data sets to the portal. DCCs also partner with each other and the Coordinating Center in activities geared towards harmonizing and integrating data sets, as well as developing new ways to make the data sets and other digital resources interoperable. And for the two questions that I was asked, again, the CFDE structure is the way we're addressing those issues. So this will come up again. During the pilot phase, the number of engaged DCCs doubled from 6 to 12, and we expect the size to grow even more in the next phase. Slide 4, please, or next slide. Thank you. This slide shows the breadth of Common Fund programs and the vast array of data types we use to build the ecosystem. The word bubbles provide a perspective on the degree of representation of these data types. And as you can see, we really go across almost anything that you want to measure and almost any kind of tissue, organ, system, or species. Next slide. There are 3 significant challenges for anyone trying to assemble data for analysis. CFDE has addressed each of them in the pilot. You can see these on the right. And we will build on these experiences in phase 2. Examples dealing with each of these will be shown in the talk. Next slide. In the pilot phase, we've begun to address findability and accessibility through 2 efforts. The portal, which is accessible via the Coordinating Center for the first link in the deck, and this will be made available to you. The splash page to the right shows you what it looks like when you actually get into the portal. I'll also put it in the discussion. We've also worked on making data, tools, and appeters available on Kavatica, which is part of the Kids First program. and which Jack is a part of as well. So thank you for all the work you're doing on that, Jack. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, we've begun to provide harmonization analysis in our pilot phase. For example, we have a common RNA-seq pipeline that we're sharing with other ICs. We've created appeters, which bring smartphone-like apps to data analysis. These and other products are demonstrated in a series of YouTube talks on the clickable link in the deck. Please advance one. To the right, you can see a schematic of integrating tools and data from the DCCs in the portal into the Cavatica workspace. Don't hesitate to contact CFDE if you'd like to begin exploring this area, or if you have anything you ask or you wish to partner with us. Next slide, please. So what is the planned structure for CFDE for the second phase, or phase 2? The primary structural change will be that the CFD Coordinating Center, instead of being one integrated with one unit, we're going to have, instead of a single center, we're going to have 5 interconnecting centers, each with a defined focus area. You can see the structure on the left. So let's highlight the functionality of each center. Next slide, please. The Data Resource Center will generate the revised CFDE portal, which will provide the landing page for CFDE. The DRC will also create the search platform and integration for common fund datasets, tools, and resources. The Knowledge Center will provide a portal for knowledge graphs of CF programs and will enable users to upload assertions into CFD workspaces. Next slide. The Integration and Coordination Center will support integrating CFDE-related activities among the centers and participating DCCs. This center will also coordinate the sustainability and evaluation activities of the program. And we feel that evaluation is an exceptionally important part. And so we have that crafted into each of the centers and into each year of our programs. The Cloud Workspace Implementation Center will support cloud computing activities in select cloud workspaces and will be designed to provide support for novice users while allowing flexibility for expert users who wish to bring their data into the workspace. Next slide. The Center for Training will coordinate the training efforts of the CFD Consortium and produce on-demand scalable training. We will also support additional training efforts emphasizing underrepresented groups and underfunded institutions. And those are some of the examples. Next slide, please. No talk would be complete without a schematic showing how the portals will be integrated over time. Our goal is to make this as seamless as possible through the top diagram of the CFD portal and integrating the various pieces so that it will be as intuitive as possible for the user while providing the needed flexibility on the back end. Next slide. As was previously mentioned, we're also part of NCPI through our Kids First Center, which is also part of our DCC. We also integrate, for example, with and work with GTEx, which is part of AnVIL. So this is Kids First is our initial focus point into and liaison point into NCPI. Next slide, please. Our moderators asked that we answer a common question about federated versus centralized data. As our efforts are based on a 10-year funding limit for common fund programs, we require a federated data storage approach. And again, a reminder, CFD is not setting up a repository. Its portal is a gateway platform to help users find, use, and work across the federated data. So again, we have federated data, but the metadata and assertions will be centralized and accessible via the portal. Whenever we
you have 1 minute.
Whenever we transition, whenever we transition from a program DCC to a long-term repository, annotation richness will also be lost. We hope to minimize that loss through a central search portal based on metadata and assertions. We're doing that through persistent identifiers and data repository service. Next slide. I still have 3 minutes on my timer, but anyway. IC, there are 4 models for IC sustainability, and we present them here. But finally, let me answer the last question. Can you go ahead a slide? Where we've been successful enabling research discovery, we've been doing that by empowering the creativity of data generators and data users. We create partnerships that require at least 3 common fund programs, DCCs, and they create tools and annotation that can work across data sets. And we've produced programs that are available and tools that are available for others, such as the RNA-seq pipeline, the data distillery, which provides knowledge graphs in the playbook. Finally, we found that using RO3s, which incorporate at least 2 common fund program data sets, have been exceptionally helpful because these products will be returned to the DCC's repositories in GitHub, and this brings in innovation to the program, as well as providing feedback on program data sets and other portions of the program for people who aren't familiar with Common Fund datasets or the CFDE. And next slide, real quick. That's the team. We couldn't do anything without them. And finally, for your click one more slide, please. Just click through that pretty quick. We have bonus content for you to look at later. What CFDE asks new DCCs. Next slide, and then 2 slides on our lessons learned. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, George. Really appreciate it. And I think we're going to be sharing the slides out afterwards. So if we went fast through any of the sections, people will be able to see that. Next, I want to introduce Ken Gersing, Director of Informatics at NCATS. And Ken, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay, good. Next slide, please. Thanks for inviting me, and it's so fun to hear different systems. And so I'm going to describe N3C. N3C is the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, and basically a timeline. This was started at the beginning of COVID. We opened up the data. It will be 3 years this September. So at the state of the state right now, we have about just under 20 million patients. These numbers are a couple of weeks old now. It's 26 billion rows of data that people can access. There's 481 concurrent studies, over 3,500 investigators. We have one more site, I guess this gets updated every week. And we have 326 institutions using the data. The data in the bottom right map of America, data comes from all 50 states and is unified into a central repository. Next slide, please. So N3C was put together when COVID hit. We said to the CTFA and the CTRs and community hospitals and FQHC, this is all hands on deck for public health. Please send us your data in any of the common data models. We will harmonize that data and stick it in a central repository, which is what N3C is as a centralized set. All the harmonization work that was done was actually started many years before COVID, and that's how we were able to pull this off so quickly. Next slide. And extensive governance. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. On the top of this is how the data contributors give us the data. It comes as a limited data set. We clean the data every Friday night. We harmonize all the data. Like I said, it's over 26 billion rows. And on Monday morning, there's a new data version available for the community at large, the 3,500 investigators. To get access to the data, it's kind of the bottom of the slide up. You submit a very short request. It's called the data use request. Is looked at it by a federally staffed DAC who reviews the data, and you are given a workspace to get access to it. Next slide, please. And like a lot of what we've heard already today, it's a secure centralized system. It's dual authentication, and it's in a FedRAMP moderate GovCloud instance with the very much like what you've heard before. We bring the users to the tools and data instead of sending the data out. Next slide, please. So now is really what I want to talk about, because I was asked to talk about federated versus centralized, and I don't actually think that that's a correct question. I've put a lot of thought into this, and I think the answer is really more yes than one versus the other. And here's an example I'm giving. So all the data that comes into N3C, like I said, it's cleaned and scrubbed every Friday night for availability on Monday morning. But what you're seeing here is just some of the cleaning that goes on. And there's the obvious one. We want everybody to be in a single weight. So, grams and kilograms have to be harmonized. And that graph with the bar graph, what you're seeing is the blue are rescued units of poorly done or non-standardized units. And the right graph is even more interesting, is that each of our 78 federated sites defines things differently. So a visit, a length of stay or a visit is different for University of ABC versus University XYZ. So there has to be some harmonization, national harmonization of units and data quality and what things mean. If you don't do that, you maybe end up combining apples and oranges. So here's a place where I think there is going to need to be some centralized repository. Next slide. But there's also what I think is more a hybrid version. So N3C is COVID. That's what it was started out to be, but we're moving beyond COVID as we appropriately should. And so in this slide, and I apologize for being complicated, but the red site is UNC. They actually send us in the tenant pilot, we call it, their entire deep limited data set, EHR data, everything from beginning to end. And we clean it, and you see the arrow is double-sided. We return it back to them, harmonized, cleaned up. And the same thing with Duke, or the same thing with West Virginia. So everybody now can go off on their own local repository and partner with all of our 78 sites, because now we've cleaned all their data and given it back to them. So here we've kind of mixed central and federated. In keeping going to the right, if we, in the tenant, if Duke and UNC wanted to work on hypertension, we pull just a subset of their data out of that cleaned up set and give access to just those people, and that's a centralized use of it. But it's also kind of not centralized in that UNC and Duke are controlling their own virtual private cloud, and only they are into it. So it's centralized in that it's at NCATS, but it's federated in that it's only those people sharing data with each other. So it ends up being kind of a hybrid. Next slide. So the other thing that I think that the challenge of federated versus centralized is that N3C and real world data, I think if you think of real world data, and I think the Cancer Common, actually both repositories really point this out, is that real world data is not just EHR or CMS or whatever. It's just, gluing a person back together, whether it's images or omics or EHR data or CMS data. Is the answer to it is yes. So you're going to have to glue this together. So the gluing function, when we use something called PPRL, is going to have to be done centralized or at some sort of service, because you don't want to be doing a point-to-point matching. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that the data can't be decentralized, but the matching itself should be centralized, right? Because we don't really want to do this multiple ways of point-to-point. And so, N3C has this model where it's not necessarily the model, but where the data broker is the honest broker, is independent from where the data is, so we can move that data around and that linkage around. Next slide. And so this is a perfect example. This is a slide from Regenstrife, who is our honest broker. And then and I wish I had a big graph here that said no data palaces. N3C was, because of COVID, a data palace, but it's not sustainable. We cannot have data palaces. So in the upper right pie chart, you can see we're actually looking at data in different enclaves. There's the Midrick enclave, there's the All of Us enclave, there's NHLBI. So really what you want to start to see is enclave to enclave connections. I think that that's really where we're going. And I think we have to be, because I don't think anybody can be a data palace. Next slide, please. So, so this is my last slide. And so I think my opinion is that we are going to continue to have these commons, a tragedy of the commons, so to speak, and that's actually fine. CMS has their common analytic repository, and NCATS has one, and Cancer has one, and then that's all good. And there's reasons for this. People need control of their data. They have local things that are unique. But I think what we should be thinking about is, at a time when we need to share it, there's an infrastructure to share it. And I'm stealing the concept, the word Freeport, from Alistair Thompson, who is from NHLBI. But the idea of this is that two enclaves, at the time that they need to share, and we'll just make up a silly example, CMS wants to share data with FDA, and CMS has lots of its FDA, let's say, has vaccine. The honest broker says these are the two we can glue these together. We have the ability to go through RAS or any other federation where we authenticate people. Then that data from those two different repositories, those two different commons, comes together in this ephemeral workspace, which Alistair used to refer to as the Freeport. It is at that point available in ephemeral workspace, meaning that while FDA and CMS are working on it together, it's there to be used. At the end of the use, it is either archived or destroyed or whatever. And my plug would be that we should be working on the governance on how that data is placed in those temporary spaces, in addition to the large commons we're creating. And so this is something we're working on, and with the PCORI Trust Fund, we were lucky enough to be recently got a grant for this, and through ARPA-H, we're trying to see if we can actually pull this off. Our first one that we are working on with MIDRC in kind of a pseudo Freeport, and that we've had 2 different instances of our AWS, but we're trying to move beyond that and kind of set this up. So it's really that third space. So I don't think there is a federated centralized. I do think that the answer is going to be yes, both. So anyway, that was incredibly quick. And again, thank you all for inviting me. It was very interesting.
Thanks so much, Ken. I love the answer of yes to that question. I think that reflects the optimization that it is. Next, I want to introduce Mike Schatz, a distinguished professor at Johns Hopkins and a co-I on the AnVIL project.
Thank you, Jack. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Schatz. I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins, and as Jack said, I'm one of the co-directors of the AnVIL project. Next slide. Sort of building on the themes that we've been talking about at this whole meeting, the sort of main motivation for AnVIL in my mind comes in 3 different ways. So it starts with data. And as we've been talking about all day, right, there's huge amounts of diverse data types being generated across, NHGRI and more broadly across NIH and biomedical data science more generally. And those data need to kind of live somewhere. They need to be sort of accessed in a consistent way. There's lots of opportunities to bring data together in novel and unique ways. To support that, we need sort of a really rich compute environment where we can kind of work with data in a variety of ways, be it from the command line to notebooks, to sort of graphical user interfaces to workflows. It's kind of all necessary. In the same way that you might use your own laptop in a diverse set of ways, or your own sort of on-prem data center in a diverse set of ways, we kind of need to do all of those things and more. I think that's our central charge in the cloud, is sort of incentivizing people beyond to do things that they can't even do in any other way. And then finally, it's all about community, right? It's all about bringing people together. It's about bringing data together. It's about being able to make those scientific discoveries that would be impossible to make without the types of resources that we've seen before. Next slide here, I'm going to super quickly walk you through some of these components. Benedict introduced many of these components in his presentation, so I can be super fast here. So AnVIL is a federated system in the sense that there's many applications that are all tied together through common APIs, common data sets, common data management tools, much in the same way that your own sort of laptop is one computer, but has many different applications. You might have a web browser, an Excel, an email client, all in one laptop, all kind of tied together through these supporting systems. Next. So at the top here, we have Terra. That's for our workspaces. That's where we launch batch workflows, interactive tools. Next. Then we have tooling and support for sort of harmonizing data so that you can build synthetic cohorts. We have tooling in place so you can sort of store and share your workflows. Next. And then we have a diverse set of tools available so you can do different types of interactive and batch analysis to be able to kind of make those discoveries that you want to make. Next, please. All of this takes place inside of a secure computing environment, and still called FedRAMP certified security environment. If someone steals your credit card number, I can issue you a new credit card. But if someone steals your genome, it's a one-shot issue. So we take security very, very seriously to make sure that that just never happens. I should also mention in this sort of federated environment, there's many different entry points from APIs, from Docker containers, from Kubernetes, Helm charts, and beyond. There's many sort of entry points that if you have additional tools you want to bring in, we probably have a way to work with you to bring them into the FedRAMP environment. Next slide is a sort of overview of the types of data that we have. Within AnVIL, we kind of have our core data set that is centralized. These tend to be speaking to kind of the major NHGRI consortium, things like common diseases, Mendelian diseases, and beyond. But I wanted to also highlight, in addition to kind of our core data sets, very much like we just heard, we're very aware of, the large community of data that exists outside of the AnVIL. It'll never be the case that every data set will be in the AnVIL, so we have to have those technologies in place. We participate very strongly in the NCPI platform and sort of other initiatives like GA4GH, where we can sort of implement the right standards so that we can have security, that we can have authentication, that we can move data between these systems as seamlessly as possible. Next slide. And then my second question was, talk about some of the research that has been empowered on the AnVIL, specifically with interoperability. So next, here's sort of a nice inward-facing example of what's possible. This is a PCA plot, sort of a representation of about 140,000 genomes that have been sequenced through the Centers of Common Disease Genomics. Normally, when this would be colored, it would be colored maybe by ancestry of the sample that was participating. But here we've colored it by the sequencing center, really trying to emphasize that several major centers around the United States were all able to combine their data in a unified way to do a joint analysis. Now, doing this outside of the AnVIL, outside of the cloud, would have been incredibly difficult or perhaps even impossible to do this in a harmonized way. Next slide. Here's a couple other nice examples. So at NHGRI, we really think of ourselves as being at the forefront of genomics. So we support initiatives like the Telomere to Telomere Consortium and the Human Pangenome effort. And there was great work within the consortium to be able to develop these new representations of human genomes. And if you kind of look to the analysis that were done there, in addition to kind of putting forward new genomes, there's all this sort of auxiliary analysis that has taken place as part of these projects to bring together things like, 1,000 genomes, Simon's Genome Diversity Project data sets, GTEx from Common Fund, and many others. So there's sort of these centralized resources. And then we use them to make existing data sets even more rich, even more powerful through interoperability and integration. I think there's a lot more that could be done here across NCPI and across NIH more broadly. I know of, dozens of proposals that are currently under review right now in the case of NCPI. I look forward to those moving forward in the coming weeks to be able to take advantage of these platforms even more deeply. Next slide. Another place where we're making some progress, but I think there's a lot more that could be done here is in AnVIL. We've been partnered with something called the Genomic Data Science Community Network. This is a network of faculty, students, and trainers at institutions that have historically been left out of the data revolution, genomics data science revolution. So these are places like community colleges, historically Black colleges and university, tribal colleges and university. We've been really partnering very, very closely with these faculty and students. Here was a presentation that we kind of help support, talking about some of the needs. Here's a publication that we help support, sort of documenting them. I'm very proud to announce we've actually taken a step onto the research initiatives, where we're doing a sort of distributed soil microbiome experiment across the entire United States, hopefully working with many dozens, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of students at these institutions to be able to build a unified map of the diversity of the microbiome across the United States. But again, I think there's a lot more that could be done in this space to support these types of institutions. So next slide, here's a couple key resources. If you're interested to learn more, come to our portal, anvilproject.org. That's sort of one-stop shopping to get access to, or get an overview of all the tools, all the data sets, all the technologies that drive this. There's a lot of help there. We have a help forum, so if you have questions, go ahead and post. We offer office hours every month where you can kind of zoom in, watch a demonstration, ask questions live. And then we also had a paper published in Cell Genomics sort of documenting our perspective on the technologies. I have a huge number of people to thank. That's on the next slide. It's a really sort of federated group all over the United States working together to build this. And then on the last slide, I'll just thank you. And I look forward to the panel to be able to answer more of your questions. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mike. And really, I love the intro of how doing more in the cloud is what we need to do. Bring us home, Regina Burris, Senior Scientific Advisor at the NHLBI, to talk about BioData Catalyst.
Thanks so much, Jack. Good afternoon. I'm Regina Burris, and I'm a Scientific Program Director for NHLBI's BioData Catalyst. I'm going to turn off my video because my internet's a little quirky. Next slide. The BioData Catalyst is an ecosystem that has been developed to bring the clinical and research data that's abundantly available in today's world into the cloud for storage and analysis. BioData Catalyst provides an infrastructure that allows researchers to bring their own tools and workflow to the data, as well as use published tools and workflows within the ecosystem, reducing time and cost to compute large data resources. BioData Catalyst seeks to support heart, lung, blood, and sleep researchers by developing and integrating advanced cyber infrastructure, leading-edge tools, and fair data. We're dedicated to providing the necessary resources to empower researchers in their pursuit of groundbreaking discoveries while continually building new functionality as needed and supporting scientific innovation. We're dedicated to the vision of creating a community-driven ecosystem that implements data science solutions to democratize data and computational access to advanced heart, lung, blood, and sleep science, equip researchers with the tools they need to drive transformative research that enhances health and well-being. Next slide. So what does it mean when we say BioData Catalyst is an ecosystem? Technically and architecturally, it's a secured cyber infrastructure of interoperable platforms working together to enable heart, lung, blood, and sleep research. This diagram illustrates the primary components that are found in BioData Catalyst, echoing Benedict's earlier discussion of the data biosphere and illustrating the modularity. Within the ecosystem, a user can search and browse available data, access workflows, and use the TopMed imputation server. Once a user has identified data of interest and data access has been verified, they may bring their own tools or use available tools in a secure, personalized workplace for analysis. Next slide, please. Here's a summary of the primary BioData Catalyst platforms. Gen3 and PicSure are our primary data and metadata management resources, and 7 Bridges, also known as Valsera now, and Terra are the analytic platforms that comprise BioData Catalyst. Gen3 indexes all data and enables faceted search for authorized users to create and export cohorts to workspaces in a scalable, reproducible, and secure manner. PicSure complements Gen3 by enabling secure search and access to all clinical data and genomic variants, feasibility queries, and also allows cohort building for extraction and analysis for analysis. Our primary platform is the 7 Bridges platform, where we provide secure collaborative workspaces for analyzing data using hundreds of optimized common workflow language analysis tools and workflows. Jupyter Lab and RStudio are available, as well as SAS. We also work with Terra to provide a secure collaborative workspace to organize data, run and monitor workflow analysis pipelines, also using Jupyter Notebooks, RStudio, as well as Hail. And with Terra, we're working to interoperate with NIMHD's Share platform. Next slide. So data availability in BioData Catalyst is constantly changing. As a user-centric endeavor, we focused initial development on the needs of one of NHLBI's largest data investments, TopMed. So many of the assets and tools available in the ecosystem are based on the needs they expressed. We are now moving forward to expand BDC to other NHLBI programs and partnerships. For example, BDC now has a partnership with BioLink, the long-standing NHLBI repository, which was established in 2008 and houses both the NHLBI biological specimen repository and the clinical data repository. Many of the clinical studies are currently being ingested into BDC, and we're looking to establish a BioLink at BDC presence. to enable access to the biospecimens as well. To support the needs of data generators, NHLBI funded the BioData Catalyst Data Management Core in 2022. This core provides support and concierge service for data generators and research consortia. Next slide. BDC also features a bring your own data option that supports flexibility and analysis for researchers. This is a critical feature that's proven important for our users because it really expands the types of work that can be done within the ecosystem, particularly allowing the bringing in of data to work with existing data on the platform. Next slide. This slide provides a summary of the components supporting analysis in BioData Catalyst, including multiple analytic workspaces featuring Jupyter R, Python, SAS, genomics pipelines, opportunities for collaboration, and multiple search options. Next slide. So for this session, we were all asked to address 2 questions, and the questions for BioData Catalyst was that federalized versus centralized question, as well as the impact of user-centric prioritization on BDC's development. Next slide. So I agree with Ken that the answer to federated versus centralized is yes. But in the context of BDC, BDC is conceptualized as primarily a federated ecosystem. We're based on, I think you're 1 slide ahead. Oh, you know what? I didn't. Back 1 slide. Okay. So the federated architecture for BDC is our BDC consortium, which is RENCI UNC, Gen3, Picture, Valsera, Terra, and a partnership with NHLBI's BioLink. Within that federated architecture, we're leveraging GA4-GH standards, including CRAM, DERS, passports, and phenopackets. We collaborate with the other platforms that you've heard about in this session to implement RAS via NCPI, and we're working on expanding FHIR within the ecosystem. So the advantages of the federalized data ecosystem as from the NHLBI perspective here is that we can send the compute to data, the data stays in one place. It increases security because we can track who accesses it when they access it. You don't have multiple copies downloaded and circulating around. It increases data availability and diversity of the folks who can access it, as well as increasing scalability. And it allows us to implement governance and standards that are consistent with our federated partners. Now, the final slide. Well, actually not the final. BDC is a user-centric ecosystem. This is one of the strengths of BDC. We prioritize the needs of heart, lung, and blood and sleep researchers. The BioData Catalyst Fellows Program was a core part of establishing the initial user group for BDC. They were working in the system and giving us feedback on the fly. We focus on using user feedback to drive future development. We believe in supporting personalized user experiences. This is one of the reasons we've invested in the data management core. And we also have, we emphasize data security, the ethical implications of highlighting fair data and responsible data management practices, and empowering data access. And then the final slide, I know I'm at time. The final slide is why BioData Catalyst, and this sums up the other slides. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Regina. I just want to check. I believe we're still on time, so if you have the full 25 minutes here, I would ask if, to the extent that internet allows, if Tanya, George, Ken, Mike, and Regina could come onto video. There's a lot of good questions in the Slido, and we could just kind of go through them. So I think the top one that was interesting, and this came up early in the session, which may have also been a carryover from session one, is this dizzying amount of information for a non-data scientist to process. Is there an onboarding beginner's guide for understanding the NIH data infrastructure or infrastructures?
I can take a stab at this. I agree it's dizzying. An analogy that we often talk about is like the transition from gas-powered cars into electric vehicles. But probably a better analogy is the transition from horse and buggy into rocket ships, right? It's such a dramatic transformation that we're all going through there. I don't want to speak to the entire NIH data infrastructure because, you know, as you've been hearing about today, there's many different components to it. In the context of AnVIL, we've introduced something called AnVIL Shorts, which are 2-minute little videos that just give you little snippets about little pieces of the technology to kind of give you an introduction, some of the tools. I would say those have been very popular, so I would highly recommend, you know, checking those out, and I would be thrilled if others were to kind of adapt that style. But it's the kind of thing where you just learn it in waves. You get a little understanding of the, you know, the high levels, then you see more and more of the details. But I'm with you. It's a massive transition that we're going through right now.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, you know, there's a lot of similarities between all the things that were presented in this session, right? So you kind of maybe just dive into one of them and kind of figure, you know, one of them out. And then there's once you really understand one of these systems, there's going to be a lot of parallels across all of the systems. So I think that kind of makes it a little bit easier. I wouldn't try and focus on the NIH ecosystem because there's just too many moving parts. I'd probably focus on one of the ecosystems just to start with.
George, your hand up.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, we're trying, and we have so far had training sessions that actually talk about how to get the data, how to use the data, and what some of those tools are. And I think that is really, I think, the best way of approaching it. It's going to be a while until, if we ever have a completely integrated NIH system. So I think really finding out the kind of data you'd want to do and going to that resource and finding out how to use it and what tools are available. That's a great question for like 5 years from now, hopefully when we have more interoperability. And so we can share all those things. But right now we're a little bit stacked. But again, one program will teach you most of the basics. I think that's what people really want to learn.
Excellent. Ken, it looks like you came off mute, but I'm not sure if
I don't know if I have much to add. I think that we're really I agree with everybody. We're really asking right now. Maybe I'll use an analogy. When you bought a Model T, you had to know how to fix it. My family only knows how to put gas in a car, and other than that, they don't need to know how to fix it to use it. And I feel like we're really expecting people to know how to fix it, right, to use it. And it's really very primitive and not where we need to be. The concern I have is that the people using the data who don't know how to fix the car often misuse the data. So I do think that there's going to need to be a best algorithmic practice. So you know that I can trust to use this to get to what I want. Or you could imagine business rules that help guide you to good practice to get answers to your question. But these are all tools for science that are not in and of themselves, you know, a product. So I feel like we just have a very long ways to go to make this usable to the non-mechanic data users, which really is our goal.
Yeah, it's such an important point about the kind of interpretability of what's been done on these systems and how do you share it, and a lot of challenges there. Okay, Regina, did you want to jump in on any of this, or we could go to the next one?
I'm good. I don't really have anything to add. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, thanks everybody for those great answers. The second question is one that we actually discussed a bit, a variant of what we actually discussed a bit preparing for the workshop. And, you know, I think Tanya's slide nicely showed kind of how long it takes to develop these ecosystems, and all the ecosystems have different ages and different components. And, you know, obviously many moving parts and decisions were made over that time. And I'm wondering, you know, in the spirit of this question, what's one decision or one thing or one component, one harmonization that you've done that's really had an outsized impact on research? Really a key takeaway that you want people, a lessons learned for this community. Yes, when we added that portal, that was transformational to blah, kind of a setup. I'll leave it very broad there.
I'll put in my 2 cents. You know, N3C is I have a lot of clinical data from 4 common data models and FHIR, and I think that the foundational work, which is not very sexy, is data harmonization. It's the cliche expression, garbage in, garbage out, and we spend an enormous amount of time on cleaning and curating that data so we can trust it. And I think that is a common need across all research, and it's something that we could share with each other, is the harmonization of the data, because it's foundational, though again, not very sexy. And so I think that if I were to say something, that's where I think that we need, particularly with real world data, which is incredibly messy, I think that's where we need and should put more resources.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'll take a different tact in addition to harmonizing the data to make sure that you know, data is very, you know, findable and accessible and all that. I think what's been really transformational is that the education component, right? And that can be in the classroom setting, either for, you know, scientists, people who are already scientists today, or in the undergraduate or graduate classroom setting, really just, you know, teaching that next generation of scientists how to interact with the data, how to utilize these resources so that they're not reinventing the wheel. And just, I think that's really what's really going to, you know, make sure that these tools are well utilized. And those folks who learn how to use them can then spread the word. And even just the one-on-one work that we're doing with the folks who have expressed interest in using our resources, but don't really know where to start. So I'd say that's really gonna be transformational.
Thanks so much. George, it looks like you came off mute.
Yeah, so I'd say, you know, education is important. I think harmonization is important, but I think we also have to understand where our limits are. We don't have all the money in the world to do harmonization. So when do you do it? You have enough data to go across. Realize that a lot of the data was produced in multiple labs, and you can only harmonize it so far. That's where documentation from the beginning of the process will help anyone who's trying to use the data. But I think we also have to realize that there's always this impetus. So let's update the data to the latest standard. But, you know, a lot of the changes are very minor, and we can't keep doing it all the time. And it's really to talk with the data users and data integrators and really talk across ICs. The RNA-seq pipeline we had, I helped to develop it when I was at Top Med, brought it here. We've developed to the next level. And for example, DG Techs is using it at Genome, and really figuring out when are the times it's worth putting in the money to harmonize, and then say that's going to sit there for a while. Let's bring in new data sets, because otherwise all our activities will be harmonization, and that's too much too. So really finding out what the community wants and doing it when it's scalable and really has value, I think is an important question to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in so many different environments of that, exactly that question. Should you harmonize only prospectively? Should all the retrospective data be harmonized? What is it worth? What is the impact of doing that? And I see Regina, you're off mute.
Yeah, I would second the issue of harmonization, and you took the words out of my mouth. Is this something that sort of, particularly with the data management and sharing rules now, prospective study planning for harmonization, increased utilization of standards, more engagement with some of the standards organizations across the platforms would be really helpful. And I think to address the initial question of, what resources, what may have made the biggest impact in your ecosystem, where BDC is sort of like in the middle of its development. It's still a maturing ecosystem, but I think the metadata portions and making sure that we have accessible metadata that's searchable and accessible to our users is one of the things that's really made a difference for us.
Excellent. Mike?
Yeah. So I agree with everything that's been said, but I just wanted to really be explicit about one kind of last idea, which is, why I think for myself, and I know I'm guessing almost everyone on the call, we're interested in genomics and we're interested in biological data sciences because of the outcomes, right? We want to help patients. We want to understand the basis of disease. We want to understand where different traits come from. We're interested ourselves in this like really fundamental way. And the reality of it is there's just very, very subtle signals at play, right? You're talking about tiny effect sizes. You're talking about tiny associations often. And the way that we're going to sort of learn about those is through the incredible power of data aggregation. So I agree with everything that's been said. We need it to be harmonized in a way we can look at it. We need the elastic computes. We need to be able to train people. We need to just sort of bring everyone and everything together. So, kind of the key takeaway in my mind is in the same way that, I'm guessing everyone on the call has their own phone, that has their own laptop. Now there is this new computing environment, this cloud computing based environment where you can do amazing, incredible science that you just can't possibly do in any other environment. And that just makes me so excited about the discoveries we're going to make in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing it back to the big picture. Like, what impacts are we all going to make on science? That's awesome. So 3 of the 5 panelists, or maybe 4 of the 5, touched on harmonization, and there's some questions down in the slide IO. Wilbert had asked a question about, is this done with technology, with people, with standards? There was another one about who's responsible for standardization and harmonization within the CRDC. Just in that general idea of kind of, we all agree harmonization is important. Kind of does the panel want to take a shot at how is that being done, or how should that be done? Answer the big questions.
Yeah, so since you specifically called out the CRDC, so we do have our data standard services, or the DSS, and that's how we're trying to set metadata standards across the entire CRDC. But obviously, each of our data commons are currently taking data in themselves as well. So each of our data commons really does have their own standards that they've implemented as well. So we're trying to standardize the standards across the CRDC. But frankly, a lot of it really is manual, right? And it can be a really hard, difficult problem. But once you do have some nice standards in place with permissible values, then you can automate some of the submission. So I think it's a combination of automated and manual review.
Yeah, completely agree there. The only thing I would add is, the really exciting possibilities in the future to improve the automated harmonization. I'm sure everyone on the call has at least played with ChatGPT, and it's just like incredible, that sort of thing that can be done. I think that's a long ways away, to have a total natural language interface to all of this data. But I think there's some achievable milestones that are on a horizon. Just to sort of pick one, I think all of us are aware of, the importance of, diversity and ethnic backgrounds. And that's a really complicated concept, right? There's a strong social component. At sort of the genetic basis, what you're often really interested in is like, how do your haplotypes compare to other people's haplotypes? And that local ancestry analysis is something that we can do now reliably. And it's something I think, basically we should compete with every sample because that sort of information just is really informative about health outcomes. And I think that's very achievable in the near future.
Fantastic. George, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I would say for harmonization, a lot of harmonization happens. I've never seen it automated. So there always somebody has to come in, some subject matter expert to massage it. But so much of it disappears. And one of our requirements is in any of our partnerships, we ask them to work across, we ask them to bring in outside data, and we make them return the data back to the data generators and go back to the data repositories so that it exists somewhere. I think one of the really bad things that happens over time is harmonizations happen and then no one can find them, or they're not integrated back in, or that annotation isn't done. And so it's really trying to build on the previous work that people have done. Nothing will be perfect, but you should at least be able to find out what other people have done that can guide you and help you.
Yeah, that's really important. It's being able to preserve that and build on it is so important. Did anyone else want to jump in on that topic? So I see Regina just came off.
Yeah, just one quick note. I know we mentioned ChatGPT, but I think, I agree that there'll always be some sort of, human check on this, but, there's increasing use of large language models for the harmonization and then the human check on, what those models come up with. So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of exciting things going on in that area for harmonization.
Agreed. All right. Other questions that came up. So I think we answered this one that at least today, the next question that's at the top of the list, has there been a level of compliance that enables automated data integration? I would think the answer is no for today, but we're all hopeful that that's coming soon. Is any pushback on that from the panel? Okay, we'll leave that as coming soon. A next cluster of questions was about education. I think that came up in the first presentation, and the other presentations also talked about it, but it was looking into really the gap between GDC downloads and users, and how do we do more education of the community, both for active users today and for users of tomorrow. And everybody commented on that, but just kind of, I guess, where does education fit in the strategic roadmaps for the different ecosystems? And some of this is covered. Sorry, I'm trying to merge the questions into a actionable way.
I think all of us would agree that the education component is just really critical. And we got to get them young too, right? Like you got to get the younger scientists right on board, and it'll grow.
Yeah, and I really like how Mike put this of like, in the cloud, you can't just be as good as you are locally, right? Because then there's no incentive for me to go to the cloud. So it's not just education, but look at this amazing thing that you can do. Look at these data sets that you can combine. Like, it has to be easy enough to get people started, but also what's the next level of it? Sorry, Regina, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was agreeing. Sorry, I should be muted. Yeah.
We've interviewed some of our R03 applicants, and again, I think it's a great way to engage people is to pay them, right? I think that at NIH, do research for free is something that we suggest too often. But one of the things that we find out is we have interviews with people afterwards, and there really is a big fear, and we're working on it, that people don't want to use the cloud. People are afraid, how much is it going to cost? We don't have anyone here who knows how to use it. So our Center for Training is going to be developed on doing a lot of that with our cloud and showing people how to use it. But you also have problems with investigators who have everything on premises, and they don't want to use the cloud because they have everything that's there too. So I really think for us to get to the underserved populations and the under-resourced institutions is really to make people a little less afraid of the cloud. And it was mentioned here, show them what the really cool things are and how we can prevent some of those fears that they have from happening are going to be really important to make that happen. Because everyone talks cloud, but everyone behind everyone else's back says, oh, I heard a story about a postdoc who ruined an entire budget over a weekend, right? So we have to work on that element as well.
Yes, the infamous $60,000 run. It's that one postdoc. Any other comments on education, or I actually, we have about, if my timer's right, we have about 6 minutes left. We could also open it up to the audience if anybody has any pressing, ask me anything kind of questions. I feel like a lot of the other ones were managed in the live chat, but if I missed your question, please raise it. It's just because there's a lot of things flowing around.
The one thing I would add to what everybody else has said about education is that I think education is more than just how to use the cloud. I think that we're moving to a point where we need to combine the education of using the data, but also how to take it to that next step, which means getting through the regulatory process of how would the FDA need it? What do they need? Or getting it through the CMS process of if you can create an algorithm that improves people's health, but it's not going to be reimbursed by CMS, it really won't go anywhere. So I feel, and then there's an ethical education needs to be happening with these algorithms. And so I feel like we need to step back and say the education of big data and non-hypothesis driven data is going to require a rethinking of a soup to nuts. It's almost like, how do I do a randomized clinical trial? There's the data management, there's 21 part 11, there's all these pieces. I don't think it's any smaller than it is for this data. And I think we need to think much more broadly of that the education is an ecosystem of users of this information.
Yeah, I love that, Ken, especially when we're talking about AI and the decisions we're going to make after this, right? And how can we make that interpretable so an FDA reviewer can understand the decisions you made, the data you trained on, right? It's hugely important. I see Warren has his hand up.
Hey, I first want to say this has been really great. I've loved hearing the different resources coming together and describing what you've been doing. But I have maybe the hard question here, and I think this came out in a number of the points already. How do we make it easy for people to identify where the best data for them to answer a question is? And it may be multiple data sets, and then where where they can do that compute, where they can find the right tools. So again, thinking about this now as an ecosystem of ecosystems, how do we do that? That seems like that's maybe the hardest problem. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. That is a hugely impactful question of just what data is available? What should I be using? Where should I be applying? I'll turn it to the panel.
In the context of NCPI, there's a lot more that needs to happen, but as a useful starting point, there is this NCPI dataset catalog, which tries to sort of aggregate, all the different cohorts that are available, the major cohorts that are available on the different NCPI platforms. Just sort of, presents, the study, the DB gap ID, the disease relevance, the type of data that are available, number of participants, and sort of, really high level characteristics that are there. I think there's a lot more that needs to happen here. And I know I'm aware of, some sort of concrete proposals to make progress here. But I think this is, to your point, I think this is a great sort of starting point about just exposing the data sets that are available and getting access to them. In the context of AnVIL, we're also sort of piloting some new technology, something called Duos, that helps with that review, because inevitably, a lot of the data that we're interested in is protected data sets. You still have to apply for access. You have to make sure that your research goals are aligned with the consents of the samples. That will forever, some version of that will forever be part of the process, but we want to make that as efficient as possible as well, so that, the data just are not walled off from users, so that you can actually go work on them.
Thanks so much, Mike. This is going to have to be our last question just for time. Does anyone else want to jump in about 45 seconds and talk about because there's a number of efforts across the NIH that solve this in different ways. I see Stan has his hand up. I should have called on Warren earlier.
So I'll say two quick things. One is that I fear that with ChatGPT sucking the oxygen out of every discussion, that we're not going to be able to convince everybody to go back to the hard work of harmonization at the level we need. So we need to be on the alert for that. My second point would be that to this question of how we help people find the right data and the right tools, Warren, I've seen some universities not my own, do a really good job of having a concierge that greets particularly industrial users at the front gate so that they can find their way to the right faculty member. Maybe we need to have some small investment in the idea that somebody ought to know all of these systems and be able to do some curation for individuals who have a hypothesis in their pocket and they want to know where the best data and the best tools are for X.
Thanks so much, Dan. I think that's a great way to end it with that forward-looking idea. I really want to thank Regina, Mike, Ken, George, and Tanya for the great presentations and questions. For everyone on the group, we're about to go into a small break. I think you're back at 2:25. Please stay logged into the Zoom. And as I said in the chat, if your questions weren't answered or you have more questions to ask, please keep sending them in and we'll figure out a way to get them to you offline.